Hello, I'm Kats, and welcome to today's video. So today I'm doing an impromptu free-to-play champion showcase because I was inspired by a recent change in the build for the specified champion we're going to be talking about today, who, of course, as the title would suggest, is Criodan the Blue, the ultimate hard mode Fire Knight epic champion. So without further ado, let's dive right in. This is a really great addition. When, for those who don't know, a little bit of like history here, when hard mode Fire Knight came out, it was basically impossible for most people to handle. I think the meta originally was like reflex and on reflex sets on like a Gory, who was like a triple hitter, 100% chance to freeze. And that was like the whales and krakens were kind of making that team, or those types of teamworks, or it's just like a bunch of ally attacks and cardials and all the stuff that most people didn't have access to. But of course, Newt then was released with the Call of the Arbiter, I think, miniseries thing. And then slowly but surely, they started to add a couple of epics here and there, like Criodan the Blue, who came in and just kind of made hard mode Fire Knight more accessible to the masses. So it is fairly obvious as we'll go through his kit, but nonetheless, you can kind of see why he's so good in hard mode Fire Knight as we dive in. So on the A1, we have a triple hitter here that has a 35% chance when booked of placing the freeze. So each hit has a chance to place the freeze, which is great, meaning that you can place a freeze on all three hits, but overall, I think it maths out to like a 70-something% chance that you're going to land at least one freeze. I can't do the math on the fly, but there is a high likelihood chance that you're going to land a freeze, at least one freeze on the A1, but you could also land zero. It kind of depends. There's RNG involved, of course. On the A2, more freeze. It is a 65% chance double hitter when booked of placing another freeze. So again, same thing or similar logic, where there's a pretty high likelihood that you're going to land at least one freeze, but you could land both. You could land zero. And then to top it all off, we have a turn meter fill ability, increase speed on the whole team for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So he cycles through his abilities really well. He makes everyone go faster, and then he comes back in with 2 abilities that can freeze, which is fairly unique for an epic and kind of why he's primarily designed for hard mode Fire Knight. But it gets a little bit better as well with the passive here, that every time he lands a freeze, he gets some turn meter fill, and this does apply to each individual freeze that you would land against the Fire Knight. So you can get a decent amount of turn meter, which helps him once again cycle through his turns. In terms of a build, I do think that the best set on Criodan the Blue, and there are some people who run multiple Criodan the Blues. That is not a bad thing to do, especially if you're just trying to get through hard mode Fire Knight, maybe for the first time, for the Marius missions, or for whatever your goals are. Relentless set is definitely the way to go, in my opinion. I think it's a lot better than Reflex or Merciless, even though he can get benefits from those sets. Having him cycle through his abilities by actively using them is just a lot better, because no matter what, you're either going to be boosting your team to help them take their turns, or you're going to be placing freezes against the Fire Knight or extra hits into the Fire Knight shield, which is just overall good to do for your team. Going through the individual gear pieces, they're pretty much what you would expect for a champion such as this. So we have an accuracy banner with some speed on it, and of course speed, accuracy are kind of the main things you're going to want to go for. I opted to go because I'm kind of min-maxing my Fire Knight team a little bit. Fire Knight stage 6, I'll highlight there. We'll run it in a little bit here just to kind of talk through that. But this is a crit damage amulet with some accuracy on it. We have a defense ring because he has a relatively low base defense. So if he happens to take a hit, he can survive. But we're mainly getting, benefiting from, this is one of those weird rings that normally you kind of sell. But we get some defense to boost his defense, get some attack to boost his damage. He has attack based on his damage despite being a support champion. So he doesn't hit that hard, but every little bit counts. And then a little bit of HP as well. We got speed on the boots with some crit rate and some accuracy, some more survivability with the defense. We've got attack on the chest with speed and accuracy. We've got crit rate on the gloves, speed and accuracy. We've got speed and crit rate on the shield. We've got speed, crit damage on the helmet, and then we've got speed, crit rate on the weapon. So his total stats are as follows, and bear in mind that you can see that there's a lot of gear that's not taken to level 16 just because it's not really required. We're not really taking that many hits from the Fire Knight, as we'll see in a bit, and it's just not necessary to fully optimize it. But of course, if I wanted to maximize his damage, I should probably at least take the amulet to 16, get him more defense, more attack here, etc. But he just doesn't really need it, and I don't think that the 5 seconds it might save on average is really that important. Maybe that's probably even exaggeration of what time it would save. But anyways, total stats here, nearly 50,000 on the HP. attack, not that high, because again, he's a support, but almost 4,000, 3,800, 3,300 on the defense, 295 on the speed. So definitely focusing on the speed. That's why we can focus more on speed and accuracy, because we went crit rate on the gloves. However, I will say that if you're just trying to build a utility Criodan, crit rate is completely optional. You can just build him fast, survivable, and accurate, and that is going to be an A-OK build. Again, he's not really a nuker, so he's not going to do a bunch of damage to the waves, but it does help if you can swing it. So full crit rate, 166 on the crit damage, and then 400 on the accuracy. Now the rest of the build is where you can definitely start to synergize with his kit overall and really make him supercharged for the purposes, once again, of Fire Knight. So in terms of a relic, I have just your basic Molten Death Bell, but this is a really, really strong relic for him that most people should have multiple copies of. And yeah, it gives you accuracy, which is helpful, of course, but you just get 10% turn meter when you apply a freeze. And again, this does apply when you're applying the freeze to the Fire Knight. Even though he cannot be frozen, it gets converted into turn meter. It still counts as you attempting to place a freeze. Granted, it only occurs once per turn, but nonetheless, you get some turn meter. And I guess it, if you level it up a bit higher, you can get a little bit more turn meter boost, which you probably could do if you're willing to spend some of your relic upgrade resources on this. But I'm keeping it at the base level just because it's not that important. But nonetheless, it will add up over time. But I combine that with this Pentagon gemstone, which is only epic. So again, it should be relatively accessible, but you get 10% turn meter after taking an extra turn, which of course synergizes with the Relentless set. So you just get even more turn meter after the turn, meaning that you get your next subsequent turn a little bit sooner or faster. Then when it comes to the blessing, we're optimizing around Fire Knight here. Obviously, I'm lucky enough to have him be at 4-star, so we're taking advantage of Phantom Touch. So we want to get as many hits into the shield as possible. Again, we'll look at the team and see how that synergizes with the team. I guess I should also point out that my crowd in the blue, I am an endgame player. He is +4 empowered, so you may not have that, and so my stats are relatively inflated because of that, but that does not make or break the success of the run, him being a little bit more powerful and or survivable. Last but not least, we have the masteries. And when it comes to the masteries, it's a pretty par for the course layout here. For the offense tree, we have what I like to call the crescent shape, which just means we're hugging the left-hand side, and then we're ultimately ending on Giant Slayer. He has a triple hitter on the A1, so you benefit from getting the enemy max HP hits whenever they can proc. Methodical is nice because he is going to be using his A1 a lot, and then just, all of the more damage to bosses and things with higher max HP, etc. on the left-hand side of the offense tree. But the more important part to focus on here is the support tree. So we have, your standard accuracy boosting stuff, but we also have what I call the Y split, which is the turn meter filling from rapid response, i.e. when his increased speed expires. But more importantly, arcane celerity. You might not think this would work, but as I talked about earlier, when it comes to placing the freeze on the Fire Knight himself, that technically counts as the boss removing the freeze and then converting that into turn meter decrease. So you do get credit for running arcane celerity. You will get turn meter every time, or have a chance to get turn meter every time you place a freeze on the Fire Knight when his shield is down. So that is useful, once again, for cycling through your turns. And then beyond that, we have Cycle of Magic, a little bit of turn meter or cooldown reduction potential. And then we also have the Lore of Steel for the extra stats in case you have some stat boosting sets. So I opted to skip out on, Sniper, Master Hexer, because he only has freezes in his kit, which cannot be extended, as you can see there. But you could opt for, Lasting Gifts to extend the duration of increased speed. But to me, he cycles through his turns so much with the Relentless set that it doesn't really matter whether or not he gets that extra turn. But that is something you could do if you're buying masteries, for example, and you need to pick something. So with that, let's jump right into the Fire Knight showcase. As I mentioned, I personally run stage 6 on hard mode. I have a team that can succeed on stage 10, and it is the team that I used. I guess I could show that as well. It is the team I used to get the Marius missions complete, but there is kind of like a catastrophic failure scenario that is relatively unlikely. So it's probably like 98% success rate or something like that. But the fail that I saw, which I anticipated, was like so catastrophic that I just don't want to lose 40 energy every 100 runs or whatever it is. And so I don't actually run this team, but I do run this team here. So it's a pretty standard cut and dry double ally attack composition. I'm using Leda Mikage here. I'm using a previous fusion and Lanotharil. We're using Criodan, of course, who's a relatively accessible epic. We're using Newt. If you've been playing long enough, you probably have a Newt from his fusion. And then Tomb Lord I'm using because I do like him as a kind of an upgrade to a Stag Knight, but a Stag Knight would do a similar job for this team. Decrease speed on the A1, multi-hitter A1, and then decrease defense and decrease attack. So debuffing when you get to the boss, but also debuffing for the waves. Now let's go ahead and see this team in action, and then I'll talk a little bit about the AI overrides as we kind of go through. So I choose to keep my Mikage in form 1 on the first wave, just because I want her to open up with her abilities proper on wave 2. Again, that's kind of preparing for hard mode stage 10 in terms of the AI overrides, just because there's a Riho Bone Spear and you want to make sure that she's controlled, otherwise she will cleanse all your debuffs off and then you just have a miserable time. So kind of optimizing around that, I just leave Mikage in form 1, so she's free to ally attack. You can see there she's also in a relentless set, which is beneficial but not mandatory for this particular team. It does help, of course, to get more ally attacks more often. Lanathril, I think he has opener don't use on his ally attack, or maybe he has free reign because he doesn't really use it on wave 2. Newt, he's allowed to use his AoE. I think he's allowed to use everything on wave 2, but he doesn't Blessed Bash on wave 2. We turn that off. So here at wave 2, we turn off, allow Mikage to change forms. She starts off with that one, and again, that's thinking of the Riho Bone Spear on stage 10, where we bait off her Reflect passive with the Weaken, and then we come back around and stun eventually. Obviously, you could come back with Criodan the Blue and AoE freeze the second wave. I opted to not do that just because when targets are frozen, they take a little bit less damage. I let him freeze the first wave because that's their only form of CC, because again, Mikage is in form 1, but when Mikage is in form 2, she basically can chain stun them on her own, especially in the relentless set. She don't have to worry about them getting turns. Therefore, the freeze isn't really necessary, and I'd rather take advantage of having maximum lethality against the waves. So about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, depending upon RNG, is how long it takes to get through the first couple of waves. And then once we get to the Fire Knight, we change back on Mikage, and then it's pretty much as you'd expect. We ally attack once. So we get a lot of hits. We started at 21, we get all the way down to 6 in this case. It kind of varies depending upon the Phantom Touch procs on the team. We follow that up with the second ally attack, which breaks the shield, and then we get both of the freezers to get chances to reduce the turn meter there. So Newt A1, and then the Criodan A1s come in there and reduce the turn meter. And then Tomb Lord comes in, places the debuff, so that even if the Fire Knight does happen to get a turn, he's not going to smack us all the way into the ground. Eventually, he cycles back into getting another turn there with his A1 to place decreased speed, again, akin to a Stag Knight. And then we're pretty much off to the races there. You can see Perch Shadow on Mikage as well, another chance to get extra turns, which just, again, helps her cycle through her abilities. But our main focus here, of course, is Criodan. So once, in most cases, once the Fire Knight shield is down, he never ever gets a subsequent turn, just because we have Newt's A1s doing what they do here. And more importantly, we have Criodan just cycling through his abilities there. We got a decreased cooldown, and I think that was Cycle and Magic proc there, but he should come back in and pay attention to boost turn meter, which hopefully will proc when he gets his turn. It can also work on ally attack, so you can see there, boost turn meter, boost turn meter, boost turn meter. So the Molten Death Bell proc there, his passive is procking, like Relentless Sets is procking, so there's so much going on there. Arcane Celerity is procking potentially, so there's so much turn meter boosting when he's placing freezes that it's just really, really solid, and he just cycles through his abilities really, really efficiently. And I do think that, objectively speaking, Relentless plus the Molten Death Bell plus everything else we talked about is like the best build. And again, damage is optional. The crit rate is optional. That's more of a min-maxing thing. You can definitely get by with just having a full speed, accuracy, support Criodan build. Now, in terms of optimization here, I do want to point out the team order of this team in particular. It is deliberate to have them in this sequence in terms of ally attack. For those who don't know, the way ally attacks work, even though it looks like everyone's attacking all at once, they do actually attack in the order of the team. So that's why I have the 2 ally attackers at the front, so they can get their hits in early. Then Tomb Lord here with this triple hitter. And then we have Criodan and Newt in the back, such that once we actually break the shield, the last several hits go to the freeze A1 champions, meaning that we immediately start after the second ally attack with some freezes going down on the boss. So you don't want to put these guys near the front, you want to put them near the back, depending upon your strategy, of course, for breaking the shield and keeping his turn meter down. And then as you can see here, we have Phantom Touch here, Phantom Touch here, and Phantom Touch here. So we have 3 Phantom Touches across the team. Some people run Phantom Touch on Newt as well. You could opt for that, but for me, it's felt a little bit like overkill. But the point being is that there is a bit of RNG between the ally attacks and the A1s, or how many hits we break on the shield on any given turn, just because of whether or not those proc. It's not guaranteed. However, when you start to get triple hitters with like 5-star and beyond on Phantom Touch, it's practically guaranteed. And when I say practically, it's like 99.7% chance that you're going to get at least one, or you're going to get the one bonus hit. So, if you're lucky enough to have a 5-star blessing on your Criodan the Blue, that's kind of the sweet spot in terms of practically guaranteed Phantom Touch procs, which can help you break the shield. So obviously Criodan is fairly one-dimensional. I do think that he was basically tailor-made for Hard Mode Fire Knight. He came into the game after that content was released, and that's just his most optimal position. And that's kind of how epics should be in most cases. They should be, if they can be useful, they should be really, really useful in at least one area of the game. And his primary use case, of course, is Hard Mode Fire Knight. But there are also other play areas you can use him in the game. So I like to use him in Faction Wars. I can't show you the team at the moment because the crypt isn't open, but he's on my team because, of course, AoE freeze, even though it's not 100% chance, it's a fairly reliable CC for Faction Wars, so it's good control. He's definitely not an arena champion. He's not much of a clan boss champion either, because most bosses, or all bosses practically speaking, are immune to freezes. He could be useful in Doom Tower Wave content, Doom Tower Secret Room content. I opt to not use freeze in the Doom Tower anymore on waves, just because every once in a while there are Pixneals, and after her several buffs, she's really a lot better, I should say, not really good, but a lot better at being an anti-freeze, so she automatically purges it and then freezes your team, instant turn type of deal. So I opted to not go for freeze, but if you're manualing your way through the Doom Tower and you're really struggling to get through waves that don't have Pixneals, then Criodan the Blue can be one of your CC champions. He is great in the Cursed City when he works, same thing as Faction Wars when the restrictions allow for him to be there. The AoE freeze is a really solid form of control, but also, again, the freeze on the A1. And the Relentless set helps you cycle once again through your turn, so you can get a lot of freezes out there. Siege, not much. And Grim Forest, believe it or not, he's actually in my team deck here near the bottom. So I do have him. This is like the turn meter freeze corner, so to speak, of my deck. And so if there's a boss that, if you freeze him, he doesn't do any, he does a lot less things. And so if he comes into play, he's useful for that. And then just in general, once again, it's wave content. So if I can use him in some situations, freeze some of the enemy waves, then they can't do anything to me, right? So super solid in basically all areas of PvE, restrictive or otherwise. So yeah, that's going to do it for the free-to-play champion showcase for Criodan the Blue. Like I said earlier, I do think that this objectively is the best way to build your Criodan, specifically for Fire Knight. The Relentless set combined with all the other turn meter boosting items on him that synergize with his freezing kit is just, to me, the best way to run him, because he will just cycle Energizer Bunny essentially for your team when it comes to hard mode Fire Knight. And I do think as an epic, he is the most accessible and best epic when it comes to hard mode Fire Knight. So everyone should build him eventually in your progression in the game. Now, ordinarily, the champions selected for the showcases are chosen by you guys, but every once in a while, I like to throw in something I just wanted to share with you guys. So stay tuned, because Ezio Auditore was the winner of the last poll on my community tab page. So his showcase, I'm not even gonna spoil the build, but his showcase will be coming soon once I finish testing him out in a couple of areas. So stay tuned for that if you're keen to see how Ezio can be useful on your account. Let me know in the comment section down below if you use Criodan. Hopefully you do, and let me know how you have him built and how your stats compare to mine. Of course, once again, Endgame, so you might not have your be fully empowered and whatnot and awakened and all that stuff, but I don't think that's mandatory for the success of him in your teams. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit the like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel, for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.